Hey everyone, so in this video, we're going to be walking through an intro to the chart of accounts. I have a series of videos that come up after this where I actually walk through how to set up individually the chart of accounts by section, but this is more of an intro and to give you a lay of the land of where everything is in QuickBooks from a chart of accounts standpoint. Before we get into QuickBooks though, let's actually walk through what the chart of accounts are, because it can be an overwhelming topic, especially if you don't have experience in accounting or you've never dealt with the chart of accounts. So think about your business. And actually what I'll do is I'll take my fictitious business that I've created here. So Pre's Coffee and Donuts, right? Let's say I have a brick and mortar store and I have people coming in daily to buy coffee and to buy donuts. Let's just say I sell just those two products. Now, let's say I make a total of, I don't know, $100 in a day. That's great. That I can log as revenue or income on my profit and loss statement. However, what that doesn't tell me is how much of that was related to donut sales and how much of that was related to coffee sales. And that's important for me to then make future business decisions of, do I want to expand my donut offering or do I want to expand my coffee offering? Do I want to discontinue one of those lines? That's an example of, or that's a good reason as to why you want to categorize your transactions so that you can make better and more informed decisions about your business. Another example would be expenses, right? As part of my business, I will probably spend money on supplies or stocking shelves or actually buying the coffee beans from suppliers, paying my staff to run the store. Like, these are all expenses that I need to track. If at the end of the day, like, my daily expenses were like $500 and I were just to say daily expenses of $500, it doesn't really tell me a story of like what's going on in my business. And so that's really what the chart of accounts is. It's really a categorization of your transactions. And so you create these categories, and QuickBooks comes with a bunch of these categories out of the box. But your transactions, whether they come in from your bank feed or whether it's like an invoice that you're creating in the system or an expense or a sales receipt or whatever the case might be, you want to be able to categorize those transactions in the chart of accounts, because those chart of accounts or those categories, they then roll up into the financial statements to help you tell a better story. And that's ultimately what this comes down to. You want to be able to tell a better story about your business. And the only way you can do that is if your transactions are categorized accordingly. If I take the analogy of like a book, I think of like the individual pages of that book as individual transactions. On their own, without context, they don't mean a lot. But I take the chart of accounts as like chapters. So once I start grouping those pages into different chapters, it starts making a little bit more sense. But even individually, those chapters only tell me a little bit about the story. Now I put all those chapters together and now I have a full book and I can tell a full story. Kind of a long-winded example, but I hope I got the point across on what the chart of accounts is and like why it's important that you categorize your transactions accurately. So now when it comes to actual storytelling, I mean, you're not actually like telling a story about your business through a book. Storytelling in the accounting world is done through what we call financial statements. And the two most popular financial statements to tell stories through would be your profit and loss statement and your balance sheet. So the profit and loss statement at a high level is just showing your revenue and your expenses over the course of your fiscal year. So if you have a calendar fiscal year, you would track these revenues and expenses from January to December. And that will tell you whether your business is profitable and like where you're profitable, and then also where you might be losing money or where you're spending money so that you can make better, more informed business decisions as the owner of your business. However, you might not be the only one that's interested in seeing this information. You might be, let's say you're a small mom and pop shop or an entrepreneur, one-person business, and you might be looking for loans or investors. They're going to want to see your financial statements to understand like where you're at in terms of financial health before they start investing in your business or they start offering you loans, like if they were a bank. So that's the profit and loss statement. The balance sheet really summarizes what you own, so otherwise known as your assets, and what you owe. So otherwise known as your liabilities. So in terms of what you own, this would be like cash, your checking account, um, any kind of assets that you own. So in a coffee business, and any kind of machinery or equipment, espresso machines, whatever the case might be, these assets that you own that can be sold at a later time for a monetary value. These would be things that you own. So these are known as assets. And then liabilities is anything that you owe. So let's say you have to pay a bill in 30 days or 60 days, you would log that as what we call accounts payable. Any debt that you owe, anytime you owe money that or it's not yours, you have to pay it at some point, that is a liability. So that's what the balance sheet is. So those two statements together will help to tell a better, more informed story about your business. And in order to do that, you need to be able to have an organized set of chart of accounts that you are then categorizing your transactions to. There's also the cash flow statement. You've probably heard of that. We'll talk about that at a later time, but like for this specific video and just talking about the chart of accounts, these are the two financial statements that are the most important. Now, one last thing I'll highlight before we dive into QuickBooks is regardless of the size of your business, whether you are a small business or you're a large enterprise, these statements are universal in terms of storytelling. So for example, if you look here is Apple's profit and loss statement, billion-dollar company. You can see that they have their profit and loss statement here in an organized manner to help tell a story. Now they of course have they'll have notes to the financial statements that'll help to provide more context because there's a lot more going on in this business. But I just want to highlight these statements are universal. So you can see here the profit and loss statement. And then if we scroll down, we see their balance sheet listed here as well. Same thing goes for Alphabet, or otherwise known as Google. You can see their balance sheet, their income statement. So again, these are universal ways of telling stories in the accounting world. In terms of this specific video, what we're going to be going through is we're going to be walking through a high-level navigation of the chart of accounts, how to get there, and I'll start to orient you with what's on the screen. We'll walk through some settings. I'll walk you through how to edit any existing accounts, inactivate accounts, or activate accounts. I'll walk you through how to add new accounts, and then I'll also walk you through at a high level where this shows up from a reporting standpoint. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is head over to QuickBooks, and what we're going to do is we're going to hover over, if you have accounting pinned in your menu bar, you can hover over accounting and then click chart of accounts. You can also click into accounting here on the home page. If you don't see either of those options, then just hover over my apps and then click into accounting and then go down to the chart of accounts. So this will bring you to the list of the chart of accounts. And you can see here that it's pre-populated with quite a few accounts in the system. And this is where, again, I have a series of videos after this that I walk through how to clean up each section, because what you want to do is you don't want to be categorizing transactions to all of these different accounts, or your financial statements will become extremely overwhelming. So you just want to narrow down the accounts that you're going to use. So an easy way to start doing this is this drop down here. If you click this drop down, right now it's showing profit and loss accounts. If I just want to see balance sheet accounts, I can click into balance sheet accounts. It's going to show me those. If I want to see all of my accounts, I can see all of them in one view. And in my case, I've got 75, and to be honest, I think that's too much. So we're going to be walking through how to tone this down a little bit. But before we get to those videos, let me just orient you with what you're seeing on the screen. So of course, here in this table is the list of your chart of accounts. And I'm actually going to zoom in on the profit and loss accounts. So you can see here, I've got a bunch of, it starts with the name of the account and then it goes into the account type. So whether it's an income related account or an expense related account. The detail type is just a more detailed way of reporting or categorizing that specific line item. And then the QuickBooks balance and the bank balance. So based on all the transactions that you're carrying out in QuickBooks, this is the current balance of that account. And then the bank balance would be more applicable for balance sheet accounts. So if I go to balance sheet accounts, more applicable for when we get to or when you watch the video on connecting your bank account, this would be your bank balance from your bank account. So this will help with the reconciliation activity that you'd want to do on a regular basis. But that's what the difference is between, or that's the difference between these two columns here. But let's head back to profit and loss. At any time, you can click this drop down, and if you wanted to change the name of any of these accounts, you totally can. So if I scroll down to the bottom, you're going to want to update the names of these accounts or even remove the ones that don't make sense based on the business that you're in. And again, I'll walk through this individually in the next set of videos. But just as an example, let's find something that isn't really related to my business. Okay, here we go. So under office expenses, which is the parent account, I've got a sub account called printing and photocopying. And maybe just as part of my business, like I never print stuff, I never photocopy stuff. So it's never, there's gonna never be a time where I'm going to categorize a transaction to this account. So what I could do in this case is I could either edit this account and rename it to something else that's more applicable to my business. Or if I know that I'm not going to use this account at all, what I can do is I can close out here and let's go back down to it. And I can click this drop down and then I can click make inactive. So I'll click make inactive. And then I'm going to get a pop-up message probably letting me know that I am, here we go. So deactivating, do you want to deactivate this account? So I'll say yes. So make inactive. And now you can see that that account now disappears from here. And therefore I can no longer categorize a transaction to that specific account. Now, if I did that by mistake or error and I want to reactivate this account, it's very easy to do that. I can just click into settings and here under other, just say include inactive. And so now it'll show me my inactive accounts as well. And then what I could do is I can scroll back down. You can see here in brackets, it says it's deleted, but I can click this drop down, or actually it's right here. I can just click make active. And now it's reactivated that account. You should know that some of these accounts are, you can't make inactive. Like they are in there by default. They're either a part of a workflow or they're a core part of any business. So QuickBooks does not allow you to inactivate every account, but I would say like 95% of these you can inactivate. So that's how to inactivate an account. As I was mentioning, if you wanted to edit an account, you can come in here and like change the name of that account if needed. The other thing I will walk through here is how to add a new account. Now, you shouldn't need to add a new account because there's quite a few accounts in here. So worst case, if an account just doesn't apply to your business, just rename it to something that does apply. But in the worst case scenario that you do need to create a new account, you can click in a new account here. And then this is where you can go in and create a new account. So back to like my office expense example, let's say I wanted to create a new account called, I don't know, ergonomic. I hope I spelled that right. Ergonomic chairs. There we go. And maybe I buy a bunch of chairs that I expense on my income statement and I want to create an account for that. I could call it ergonomic chairs. Account type would be an expense. And then you can select what type of detail, type of expense it would be. So let's just say office. And then what I could do is right now, if I just create this account as is, it would just show up as its own individual line item as what we call a parent account. But if I want to actually embed it as a sub account within the overall expenses category or office expenses category, I would click make this a sub account. And then I can select office expenses. There we go. Parent account. So I'll click save. And then we'll go down to the office expenses section and you can see ergonomic chairs is now listed there as an expense or a sub account. So now I can actually log transactions. So if I buy ergonomic chairs, I can then expense it to this account. I don't know if that was the best example because you could also argue that maybe chairs are assets as well. So it might not be an expense, but just wanted to kind of throw in any kind of example there. But again, we're going to cover this in a little bit more detail as we walk through each section for the chart of accounts. But in this video, I just wanted to give you a lay of the land of like what you're seeing here on the screen and like where everything is, how to inactivate an account, activate it, edit it, and add a new one if needed. Okay, so the last few things I'll show here. So one thing is if you click into run report, what this will do is actually just generate a report of your chart of accounts. It's a really nice kind of bird's eye view of all of your accounts categorized by type. So it's a really good report to look at when you're like figuring out if you created the right accounts or you have the right ones in place. And then the other thing I'll show is if we click into reports and then standard reports, just want to quickly highlight where the balance, so you can see the balance sheet and profit and loss statement reports are. So if you click into balance sheet, you'll be able to see the balance sheet. Obviously, we haven't transacted anything, so nothing should appear here. But as we start transacting and categorizing transactions to those chart of accounts, they will appear here on the balance sheet. And if I click back here, they will also appear here on the profit and loss statement. So in the next series of videos, what we're going to be doing is we're actually going to be updating the chart of accounts, entering a test journal entry, and then actually seeing how those entries appear on the financial statements, just so you can kind of aesthetically see like how things appear with a parent account or a sub account. So it just makes it a lot easier to figure out how you want to organize your chart of accounts. But I think that's all I wanted to cover in this video. It ended up being a lot longer than I imagined, but hopefully that gave you a quick primer into the chart of accounts. And then in the next series of videos, we'll actually start building these out together. So yeah, that's all for this video, and I will see you in the next one.